Well, thanks for coming, Matt.
It's great to be here.
So excited to see you.
Thank you.
Drove all the way here from Pilot Mountain.
Yes, all hour and a half, completely downhill, of course. Yeah.
Awesome.
But a great time and always worth the time and the travel to be with you guys.
I love it. Well, thank you for being on Branching Out, where real estate meets real life.
Awesome.
I got it.
There you go.
That's the first time that I've said it without messing up. It's awesome. All right. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do. I know we're here to talk about 1031 exchanges, but I bet I would put a lot of money that the average person does not know what a 1031 exchange is.
I would not take that bet because I think you're right. So again, my name's Matt, as you know. I work for Investors Title, and my professional passion is 1031 like-kind exchanges and working with real estate owners, whether that be residential investment or commercial, CPAs, real estate attorneys, financial advisors, anybody who's in that real estate world who might have an opportunity to work with a client who's selling investment property. So that's me professionally. I go to bed thinking about 1031s. I wake up thinking about 1031s. If I stay in a hotel room and travel, if they have a room 1031, I'm staying in room 1031. So, yeah, that's me. Personally, my wife Abigail and I live in Pilot Mountain, as you noted, biggest city in in North Carolina, of course. But I travel a lot. Always love coming home. My wife and I host exchange students. So that keeps us busy in the off time. But that's me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So how long have you been doing 1031 exchanges?
Longer than I'd like to say, almost 25 years.
Okay.
So I got started real early in my professional career, came in working with Wachovia Bank. So I was on the banking side. They created their own internal qualified intermediary to work with clients who were looking at a 1031. Had a friend who called me over to the department and said, I think you may like this. And out of anybody in my life, they were more right than just about anybody I know. So I did like it. Matter of fact, loved it, and really excited every day to have these conversations with people because I know what we're talking about affects their bottom line. It affects their investments, and it affects that portfolio they're trying to build to then pass on to the next generation.
So why is it called a 1031 exchange? Where did it get the name from?
So it's from Code Section 1031.
Okay.
So very dry and humorless, just Section 1031, so Code 1031. So that's where we get 1031 like-kind exchange from.
Got it.
But we have had some semblance of a 1031 like-kind exchange in our tax code for over 100 years. So it's been around for a very long time. But back in the early 90s, and certainly along the way, we've had different iterations, different things that changed the property type that may qualify, that where the IRS may have given us a safe harbor telling us how we needed to treat certain property to make sure it qualifies. But what we have from the IRS is a gift, and it is a well-vetted and purposeful gift. And one of the myths I'd like to dispel right off the bat is the 1031 like-kind exchange is not a loophole. It's not something we're getting away with. This is something the IRS has literally said, listen, if you're an investor selling property and you don't want to pay tax on that gain right now, and you want to take those proceeds and reinvest it into other properties, then we won't tax you immediately. So it's a true gift from the IRS. But yeah, Code Section 1031.
Well, the government wants us to have investment real estate because they don't want to have to provide housing. So, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's just back it up a little bit for people that really have no idea what a 1031 exchange. What would be like your definition that you give people so they're like, oh, okay, I get it.
All right. So if I could, so we just came through tax season not too long ago, and all of us are very familiar with having to file our taxes. And some people get a return, some people don't. So for those who do get a return or have gotten a return in the past, I think it's one of the more exciting things because we're getting money back from the IRS. And so the real question comes in, we have these two little things that pop up on our shoulder. One says, use that tax return to pay off some debt and do something good. And the other one says, use that money to go create more debt, go on vacation or whatever. So, and then all of a sudden, we have this realization. Well, whose money am I actually getting back from that tax return? I'm getting
Your own.
my money. That's right. And while the IRS was holding my money, how much interest did they pay me on those funds?
0.
Absolutely right. 2 for 2. So that's the way I look at a 1031 like-kind exchange. I'm selling property, and instead of paying the IRS the tax that I would normally have to pay on the gain from that sale, the IRS is allowing me to keep it. And they're allowing me to redeploy that equity back into another investment property or properties, multiple properties, and I'm not paying them any interest in using those funds. So I'm preserving equity. I'm continuing my investment strategy, and the IRS is allowing me to do that without paying tax or interest to them in using those funds. That's the kind of way I couch it for folks who really haven't heard of a 1031 or trying to figure it out. That really makes sense to me. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody else.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so then what kind of properties can you do a 1031 exchange with? I know you said investment properties, so you can't do it with your primary residence.
Correct.
Right. And then you also mentioned the term like kind.
Yes.
So explain to us what that means. Like, can I take a house and trade it with like a commercial building, or like tell us a little bit about what you can do.
Yeah. So I think the like-kind definition can be a bit misleading at first, because the question that I get a lot is, okay, if I'm selling a single-family rental, then if it's like-kind that I need to make happen, then I need to go out and buy another single-family rental. And you certainly can. But that like-kind definition is really broad. And what the IRS specifically said was, if you're selling real property that's been held for business or investment use, you sell that property, use those proceeds to go out and buy another property or properties that you're going to hold for business or investment use. So it is wide open, meaning I could sell land and I could go out and buy multifamily property. I could sell multifamily and go buy a car wash. I could sell a car wash and go buy a warehouse. I could sell a warehouse and go buy a very, very nice single-family rental property, maybe at the beach or up in the mountains, either way.
Okay.
But it's a very broad definition in the asset class, and it's very broad in how that property needs to be used. Either, again, investment meaning rental or for a business.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. So explain a little bit about how the process works. So if I have a property and I want to do a 1031 exchange, what's the rules? I know that there's like a time period. I know you have to identify some properties. And I know you have to go through an intermediary, which is what you are.
Yes.
So explain a little bit about how the process works.
Sure. So lots of rules and regulations around how that 1031 is to function.
It's kind of like if you don't do it right, don't do it at all.
That's exactly right. You don't want to miss any steps in between. What I would first suggest, so when I have somebody that calls and expresses interest in a 1031, the very first thing that I will ask them, well, let me take that back. One of the first things I'll ask them is, have you talked with your tax advisor? I think that's the most important first step. And the reason that I say that is if I were to ask that investor, okay, what is your adjusted cost basis in the property you're looking at selling?
What does that mean?
So we take our basis. So our basis is what we bought the property for. Any improvements that we've made to the property increases that basis. The depreciation that the IRS allows us to enjoy, where we get to depreciate that property over 27 and a half years for residential, 39 for commercial, that lowers our basis. And that adjusted basis, anything above the adjusted basis, is what we're going to be taxed on.
Okay.
So if I talk with them and they don't know what their adjusted cost basis is, then what that tells me internally is they don't know exactly what the gain on the sale of that property will be, which then means they don't exactly know how much tax they may have to pay when they sell the piece of property. And if they don't know how much tax they're going to pay, then maybe they don't have all the information they need to make sure that a 1031 is worth the time and the effort to do. So that's why I want to push them back to their CPA first, just to make sure a 1031 is the right thing for their situation.
So you're a team player.
By all means.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Have to have a team.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk anybody into or out of a 1031. And the biggest reason is this. As a qualified intermediary, we cannot play the role of a tax or legal advisor. So I can't give them tax or legal advice, and they don't want it from me either. So that's really the bottom. They don't want it from me. But I want to make sure that they have good, sound advice coming into the deal. But outside of that, everything's pretty much going to happen as normal. They list the property. They go under contract for sale. Buyer chooses the attorney who's going to close the deal. What we want to make sure of for that client is that they are working with a qualified intermediary, that necessary third party that the IRS mandates as part of the transaction. They need to have an exchange agreement signed and dated in place before they go to the closing table to sell their piece of property. That's like one of the most important things. You've heard me say this a couple of times,
Yes.
but the saddest call I get is when the client calls or potential client calls and says, "Man, I'd love to do a 1031." I'm like, that's not the sad part. I'm like, that's fantastic.
Awesome.
Love it. But when are you closing? Oh, well, we closed yesterday. And I'll say, well, do you mean you were at the closing table or did you just sign a contract yesterday? Well, if they were at the closing table and they closed without an exchange agreement, the IRS says you don't have a 1031. So make sure they call and get in contact, have a relationship with a qualified intermediary so they can get that in place before they close on the sale of their property. The next thing that's going to happen that's out of the normal of a regular real estate transaction, proceeds from sale are going to go from the attorney's escrow account directly to the qualified intermediary that they're working with. We don't want those monies passing through the hands of the taxpayer in any way, shape, or form.
Because that fails the exchange, right?
That's exactly right. Constructive receipt is the whole thing we're trying to avoid, and that's actually why the qualified intermediary is involved, to make sure we're an independent third party who's receiving the funds and the taxpayer does not. So that's going to kick off our time frames. That day. That's a marked day in the 1031. So the day that we close on the sale of that piece of property, our 45-day identification clock is going to begin to start ticking.
Okay.
And our 180-day exchange period, that clock also begins on the day that we sell our piece of property. So both begin. That's an important day.
Yes. Okay. All right. So then what do you mean by identification? I know that you have to identify some properties. How many properties can you identify? How does that work? I know you have to like close on one of those, or what happens if you don't close on one of those? Like I'm giving you all the scenarios.
Yes, absolutely. So what the IRS tells us is we have 45 calendar days to actually identify property or properties that we may purchase in the 1031. And again, I mentioned it's calendar days, and I really I talk about that a lot because 45 calendar days means Saturdays and Sundays and Mondays and rainy days, and I don't feel like it days, and we're on vacation days, and I'm frustrated days, or everything in life is going on, and I'm having a hard time really concentrating on finding something. All of those count in that 45-day calculation, and those are the only days that the IRS allows us to make those official identifications for those properties. So it matters. Those time frames can be pain points to the taxpayer, to the client. So they can identify through a few different rules, but they can identify one property up to three properties through the three property rules. So I can identify 1, 2, or 3. And I talk about that a lot because let's say I'm selling property A, and I want to buy property B in my 1031. So property B is what I identify in my 45 days. So let's say we're now on day 48. Okay, we've gone through our 45 days, identified property B, set it in stone. Okay, midnight 45, I've got to buy that property if I want any tax deferred treatment.
Okay.
So what happens on day 47 or 48? Property falls off the market. For how many different reasons can a property fall off the market, right? Anything can happen. Or maybe you now have the time to do some due diligence, and you're able to walk into the property and take a look around, and you go,
Not for me.
Not for me, right? It doesn't really. I know you guys earlier podcasts was talking about not fix and flip, but renovate and rent. Maybe it doesn't fit that renovate and rent model now that I'm in looking at it. If that's the only property you identified, then there's no other property for you to buy in your 1031, and your 1031 is not going to be completed.
Okay. So if you identify more and you decide you don't want to move forward on that one, then you can punch your next one, even if it's after the 45 days.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
It's great to give yourself a backup.
Yeah.
So look at property B, look at property C, look at property D. If B doesn't work out, is C and D a possibility? Maybe you can close on those. It's just giving yourself options. And the 1031 allows for that. We have the 3 property rule, the 200% rule, and we have the 95% rule. A lot to
A lot
go
of
in,
rules.
a lot
Oh
of
my
rules to go in there.
gosh.
But again, a great reason to have a tax advisor on board and to go ahead and start talking to your qualified intermediary early so you can go over these rules so they can talk with your agent or whoever you're working with to find those properties, to make sure that there's a good understanding of what those rules are, how many and how much can be identified in those 45 days.
So what happens if you can't identify a property? Are there any other ways to continue deferring the taxes that you can kind of get into?
So let's just take it from the standpoint of we have somebody who decides they don't want to close on anything, okay, or not identify, right? They get 40 days in and they just can't find anything, and they say, I just don't want to go forward with it. Well, if they don't have anything identified by midnight of day 45, then their exchange is officially over with.
Okay.
On day 46, the qualified intermediary, pending day 46 isn't on a Saturday or Sunday, will then wire those funds back or get the funds back to the client. And those funds will be taxable just as if they never attempted a 1031 before.
Okay.
Now, if that's the case, or if they do identify and they get down the road and find out they don't want to identify anything or close on one of those pieces of property, there's opportunity zones.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, there's some other opportunities where they can take those monies and they can work with a broker out there, somebody who's a rep working with opportunity zone properties, where they can put those monies and potentially get a tax deferral. Different than the 1031, but may be of help to them if they don't want to go forward with the 1031.
Okay. So what is your craziest 1031 story?
Craziest 1031 story.
Craziest, funniest, just something like that. Like that you were like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy.
So I think sometimes you deal with people that you never thought you might have the opportunity to deal with. And you find out who exactly owns property. Now, of course, I can't really say who those people are, but you end up working with notable people, sports stars, movie stars. You end up working with neighbors and find out what property they're selling and what they're buying. And internally, it's very interesting because you end up working with people that you really would like to meet at some point. Back prior to 2018, you were able to do an exchange on personal property. So I worked with a lot of people who were exchanging aircraft and jets, and that's where you got to meet a lot of folks who do really extraordinary things to have the money to afford jets and stuff like that.
Oh, dang, I wish you could say who you worked with. That's so cool.
Yes, that's very cool. So
that is really cool.
But it's
so
really...
do you build relationships with these people? Like, so do you know, like...
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
All right.
A lot of people are working through someone else. So you might be working with their advisor and never really talk to that owner themselves. But you find out who you're working with. That's kind of cool. You know, that's really cool. But I would say the really cool thing to me, what I love most about 1031.
That was going to be my second question. What do you love most about 1031 exchanges?
Is that it treats every taxpayer the same. That's what I love. So if it's that family, I think there's two different types of investors. And you, listen, this is your specialty. You know much better than I. But there are people who are investors, and that's what they live and breathe. I mean, that's what they're thinking about what I can do next. They're strategizing. They're working with folks like you to really help them perfect what's in their brain and getting it out into reality. And then there's people who just happen on investment property. It was a property they inherited from mom and dad when they passed. They couldn't sell it. From the heart, they just couldn't do it. So they rented it out, but they don't think about it as an investment property. All of a sudden, somebody makes them an offer to purchase. They find out how much tax they might have to pay on that rental property. And that 1031 does for them the same thing it does as the hospitality pro who's selling 5 hotels and looking at buying 3 more, or the big corporation who's selling a huge warehouse and building another. It treats everybody the same. It allows them to keep that equity and redeploy it to build a portfolio that either they knew they would do, or now they're finally realizing, hey, this is an opportunity for us, our family, and for our children to come where we can really build some serious generational wealth.
Yeah, for sure. So clearly 1031 exchanges are very complex. What did you go to school for?
Not this. Not this at all. So interesting story. So I actually started out in meteorology.
Oh my gosh.
At UNC Asheville. So I wanted to be a storm chaser. I wanted to chase tornadoes, the smart decision that was. So I got to my senior year and I dropped out. I dropped out. Came back home, started working, started my career, and I worked for companies and held jobs that I never should have held because I did not have a degree. Was working at a hospital and was over HR and marketing for a hospital. Again, no college degree. I don't know if that was their fault or my fault. I don't know why they hired me, but we were putting together a program for employees of the hospital of furthering their education and how we would pay for that and making that a true employee benefit. And the president and CEO of the hospital came down to my desk and sat down and he went, okay, Matt, if you're doing this, kind of putting this program for others, why don't you go back and get your degree? And internally I went, no, I have no interest in that. And of course, out of my mouth went, yeah, of course. I'd look into that. So at 47, I went back to school and finished my undergrad and my master's, got my MBA from 47 until I was 49, worked full-time job, did school at night, and got my degree. So, but 1031s were just that one magical thing for me that even though I was out of that industry for a bit, 2008 kind of shook everybody up a bit, but was so excited to come back to it. Not a lot had changed since I was gone, but this is where God intended for me to be. It truly is, and I don't know what God has to do with tax and 1031s, but for some reason He wanted me.
He led you here.
He brought me here.
Did you ever chase a tornado?
No. I think the smart move is to run away.
I was going to say, that was probably the safest thing to do. So are you an investor yourself?
We have a couple of little investments that we work on.
Okay.
I am one of those that talk a lot more about the rules and regulations than I actually do them myself.
I get that.
So we are, I don't know, I may be a client of yours soon.
Oh, fantastic. So what kind, when you are ready to buy properties, what are you looking to do? Are you looking for long-term rentals, short-term rentals, private money lending? What's your kind of model of choice?
I really like STRs. I think those are fantastic. Yes. And I kind of am beholden to camping and what that would look like from an STR standpoint.
Yes.
And I love land.
Okay.
I really like land from the long-term investment. And so what I've told my wife and others is once I retire from 1031s, which I never will, that I want to be an agent and I want to sell land. That's what I want to do.
Okay.
I think coming from a small town where most everybody I knew owned land had farms.
Tobacco farms.
Cattle farms. And now all of those are wineries up in Surrey County. And but that land's precious and it's precious to those families. And I would like to be a trusted person eventually to help them sell that land and reinvest into it ourselves. So
yeah, that would be cool for you. Like when you said that and you were like land, short-term rentals, you like camping. I see a little glamping site for you with a bunch of like tiny homes and make a little community. That'd be super
Yes,
cool.
I could see it.
I
See,
definitely could see that.
we have it. That's
Yeah,
right.
let's strategize on
okay,
that.
let's
Cool.
do that.
We can have a consulting session.
The next podcast. That's right. Yeah.
For sure. Okay. So one thing I like to talk to people about that Greg and I kind of started on the first podcast is books.
Yes.
Because books are knowledge. That's where we get everything. So what book are you reading right now or about to read?
Right. There you go. Thank you for that. Yes. So good segue. About to read. So I have a book that's called Boundaries, and it's from Dr. Cloud. And I think his statement is when to say yes and how to say no. So from my standpoint, and I don't think I'm any different than anybody else, and I don't think it matters our jobs necessarily. I don't think it necessarily matters our family makeup, but everybody struggles with work-life balance, right? That's been said 1,000 million times.
I heard there's no such thing.
I don't think there is.
Yeah.
I think there's a way of keeping it out of chaos.
Yes.
How do you keep a controlled buzz around work and real life, especially on the real estate side?
I thought that was the 10 minutes that you sit in your car before you go inside.
It is. And cry a little bit.
Yeah.
Yell
scream,
a little bit.
Get it all out, and then go in so you can be happy with your family.
You look so settled and calm, Matt. Yeah, you should have seen me like 5 minutes ago. Yeah. So I think it's really important because, as always, I joke with agents and brokers, real estate's 8 day. Nobody needs anything outside of those times or days. So when it's Saturday and there's an open house and somebody calls me at 2 p.m. and Abigail and I are somewhere, am I supposed to pick up the phone or not?
It's tough.
It is. And because I know on the other end, that's business, that's somebody that needs an answer to something, and I can help them. And so it's really important that Abigail and I talk about when it's okay and when it's not. And I jokingly say, and it's only jokingly, is I'll answer a call, an email, or a text until she smacks the phone out of my hand. And that can be done verbally. It doesn't have to be physically. It's just a glance to say, okay, now's not the time. But it's also a good excuse to get out of something. And so if we happen to be at a piano recital or something like that, I can always go, I need to take this. So you can use it to your benefit too at times. Yeah.
It's true. All right. Well, I'm interested. Let me know how that book is. I feel like I need to be better about boundaries. I have been working on that, but
I'll see if I have any good advice for you. Yeah.
Well, is there any other advice that you would want to give to our listeners about 1031 exchanges that you didn't talk about that you're like, you guys just need to know this. Yeah. This is it.
There's so much, but I would say if I were looking at my family or my best friend, somebody who I cared for dearly, who was an investor in real estate, I would first, I think most important is make sure you have a good advisor in your corner. That advisor is worth whatever money they charge you if they're giving you good, relevant advice. Not every CPA or accountant is a real estate CPA or accountant.
It's true.
So go find one. Go find somebody that has a heart for helping others accomplish great things. So again, that's a hard ask, but I think that's one. Number two, if 1031 like-kind exchange has not been discussed, if it's not part or at least a discussion of what your future goals are in investing, it needs to be. It really needs to be discussed. I mean, if you're looking at saving 35% of the equity from a deal and you can redeploy that, and if that's an amount that you would want to leverage, I mean, how much more can you buy of property or properties if you had 35% more equity in your deal to leverage? I mean, that could be, depending on the deal size, but that could be tremendous.
Yeah.
So that would be it. And I would say, give yourself time. I think the greatest disservice the folks that I work with do, and they do it to themselves, is they're not calling their CPA, they're not calling their real estate agent ahead of time and saying, listen, I'm at A, and I'm trying to get to C. This is what's going on with my family. These are our goals. These are the things that we're really worried about. These are the things that we're trying to accomplish with this property or our next property, and allow the experience and genius of the people that you've surrounded yourself with to actually be put into place. Now, 1031 is a niche product. It is. Not everybody needs it. Not every investment real estate sale needs a 1031. But if they do, that needs to be discussed early, and you need to have good people in your corner that can help advise you and guide you. And I think a good qualified intermediary is one of those parties in that group of advisors.
For sure. Yes. If you are an investor, you need to know what a 1031 exchange is, get educated, call Matt.
Sure.
And build your team. We talk about that in our course. Build your team of professionals, of experts who know what they're doing. That is super important. All right. So before we go, just tell us a little bit about your company, how people can get in contact with you.
Yes.
So, because I know people are going to be like, oh, I'm calling Matt. I need to call Matt right now.
So Investors Title Exchange Corporation is who I officially work for. You can call me directly, 984-484-8685. That's my cell, so they can call me or text me. mlinville@invtitle.com is my email. Call me, text me, email me anytime. And as we just talked about, I will get back to you ASAP.
You are very good at responding.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
We always love having you here at Branch Wealth Partners. You've spoken at multiple events of ours, and now you're our second podcast guest. So super exciting. And you actually were one of the only people who commented on my social media post like, hey, we need speakers. And you first to raise your hands.
Why
I'm
not?
like, awesome, Matt's coming on. So love that. Well, thank you guys for coming back and listening to Branching Out, where real estate meets real life. And stay tuned for next week.